What's up, everybody? Welcome to Move the Sticks. DJ Bucky back with you. Buck, what's up, man?
Nut, man. DJ, great weekend. Looking forward to the conversation that we have today with a great man and a great coach, Leslie Frazier, who's spent a long time in the league, doing a bunch of different things, played on, the 86 Bears, the monster of the Midway that everyone talks about, potentially the most dominant defense that we've ever seen in the league. So looking forward to picking his brain about a lot of things in the league.
Yeah, he's a great friend. Someone we got a chance to know really well working with him here recently, but excited he's back in the league. And one of the reasons we want to have Coach Frazier on is because we've been hung up on this thing about offensive line. We've had this theory, this working theory we've used for a few years now about like that tomato can theory, right? Your offensive line's only as strong as your weakest link, and focusing on the whole and focusing on that group being able to communicate and be really kind of the sum is greater than the individual parts. We talk about that with offensive line. We've never had this conversation with defensive backs. You've got five guys in the secondary. How do they work together? How do they coordinate? What is the key to having a good group, not just a good individual player? So that's one of the reasons we're excited to bring him on. Leslie Frazier, you mentioned it, Buck, Super Bowl champion as a player with the Bears, Super Bowl champion as a coach as well when he was coaching with the Indianapolis Colts. Over 30 years of coaching experience, and a lot of that focused on the secondary. So nobody better to talk about this than Leslie Frazier. So here's our chat with Coach Frazier. All right, here he is, Buck. Happy to have our good friend, Coach Frazier, with us. Coach, first of all, congratulations on the new job, but we are a little bummed we lost a teammate here, man. You left us.
Yeah, you know what? I really enjoyed my time at the NFL Network, man. It was awesome, and I thank both of you guys. I mean, you guys were terrific, along with a lot of the other people there with Steve and Sandy and everybody, the whole NFL Network staff. They were just terrific during my time there. But I did kind of miss being on the sidelines, man, and gave it a lot of thought and a lot of prayer. And I think I made the right decision. But I really enjoyed our time together.
DJ, I'm so disappointed because before I could even get him up to Granada Hills to have him kind of work with some of the DBs and teach my guys how to play man-to-man, he's already gone. He was already in Seattle. Like, I wanted to kind of like pick his brain and take some of that stuff, Bear defense, 46, man-to-man, and boom, Coach Frazier's already gone. So, Coach, how's it been kind of putting your feet back in the grass?
You know, it's been really good. You know, we got some talented players there in Seattle. There's some guys in the secondary. There's some guys up front. The beauty about what I'm doing in Seattle, which was one of the things that was really attractive, I have a chance, Daniel and Bucky, to be involved with the entire team. So I'm working with our offense, with our special teams, and, you know, obviously with our defense as well. And then being able to assist Mike and try to help him be the best, Mike McDonald be the best head coach he can possibly be. So it's just been a blessing, man. It's been so good all the way around, just to have your hand in everything. So it's been really good, really good.
Coach, I'm curious, when you got your first head coaching job in the NFL, did you have somebody in a similar role that you're in now, or is this a whole new creation?
No, that's a great question, Daniel. I did an interview with the Miami Dolphins many, many years ago, and Bill Parcells, he was the president at the time. And he told me, he said, Leslie, one day you're going to be a head coach in this league. And he said, I'm going to give you some advice. He said, when I got my job with the Giants, I think that was his first head coaching job, he hired his former head coach on his staff to kind of like help him to segue from being, you know, a defensive coordinator and becoming a head coach. And he gave me that advice, Daniel. I didn't follow that advice. I wish I had, because it's a big difference going from, say, offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator to head coach. I mean, the duties are immense, and they've grown over the years. I mean, you're really a CEO today as opposed to really getting into the nuts and bolts of what has to happen on offense and defense. But I applaud Mike and John Snyder for having the foresight to say, hey, you know what? We need someone with experience to help us along the way. And so if I could turn back the clock, that's something I would definitely do.
You know, Coach, it's funny that you bring that up, because at a time where the league appears to be going younger, sometimes in some of those prominent leadership roles, there is a value for experience and expertise when it comes to being, look, we talk about like the old head in the room, the vet who doesn't want the head coach's job, but just wants to share and be around the game. What do you think are the traits and the tools that person in that role as the associate head coach or assistant head coach or whatever. What are some of the things that you think that person needs to have to be able to thrive in the role to really assist the head coach?
I think it's so important, Bucket, to be a selfless individual. You have to really take the approach that I'm going to be a servant in this role, and you got to be egoless. You can't get caught up in my name not being out in front. When you're the coordinator, your name is on that offense or defense or special teams. It's all about you and your group. Was a little bit different in this role. You're probably not going to be doing a lot of press conferences, post game, pre-game. I mean, that's not going to be you. So you have to be a person that is okay with not getting the credit, but understanding your role, and your role being to help the team succeed without a lot of fanfare. If you can be that person and have that type of humility, I think you have a chance to succeed in this role. Just being able to understand the position you're in and what your purpose is, and be okay with that. I don't think it's for everybody, but for those that are willing to sacrifice, it can be really, really good when you have a wealth of experience.
Coach, we're going to get into some DB questions here in a minute, but I want to stay on this because one of the things I would love to hear your opinion on. You always hear coaches say, you mentioned like not worrying about who gets the credit, and you always hear coaches say, "Hey, do your job, focus on your job, not on the next job. Be where your feet are." It seems like that's something it's easy to give lip service to, but how big of a challenge is that when you think about how big these coaching staffs are? To have everybody focused on their individual job, not caring who gets the credit and not trying to get the next rung on the ladder.
Well, the both of you have been around this game a long time, and that's probably the hardest thing to deal with because so many guys are trying to climb the ladder on a staff.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be coordinators if they're a position coach. If they're a coordinator, they want to be head coaches. And then one of the things when Mike did have me to talk to our team, I talked to our guys about understanding what their roles are and how everyone benefits when we succeed as a team. But it's hard to get that across, man, because guys want that next contract.
Mm-hmm.
Or if a guy is been in the league for any period of time, then he wants to be able to go out with a blaze of glory. And so how do I get the players to buy into, and this is a conversation Mike and I've had many times, how do I get the players to buy into team? Mm-hmm. What's the best thing for our team? And that may mean if I'm a wide receiver, if I'm DK Metcalf, I might not have 10 catches for 200 in this ball game, but we won. Mm-hmm. One of the Kenny Walker, who's an outstanding running back with the Seahawks and has done a terrific job in his career. I said, there may come a time where Kenny may end up with 6 carries for 30 yards, mm-hmm. but the Seahawks won the game. Can Kenny be good with that? Can he be okay with that and say, you know what? We won, man. And if we win, we're all going to benefit. And as you said, Daniel, it's harder to get that. I mean, there's so much talent in the league. That's the intangible sometimes that gets you over the top. Guys understanding, I just got to do my job and fulfill my role. And if we all do that, we have a chance to do something special.
As coach, it's funny that you're talking about roles, because that leads us right into the conversation we want to have about the secondary. And one of the unique challenges that you have, and people don't pick up on it like they see with the offensive line. The offensive line, all 5 have to play as one. We don't necessarily have that same viewpoint when it comes to the secondary, but because you've been so close to the position, not only as a player, but as a coach and a coordinator, why is it important that the 5 guys in the back end are on the same page at all times?
Well, when you guys were using the analogy about basketball, I thought that was the perfect analogy, man, because it is in a lot of ways like basketball. In the secondary, you're all connected. And it may not seem that way when you're playing corner, another guy's playing safety, or another guy playing the nickelback position. But we all have to be on the same page in order for our defense to really excel, much like in basketball when you're running a play, just the NBA Finals, which I'm a big fan of the NBA, just a few weeks ago when Jason Tatum and, say, Jaylen Brown when they were in sync versus when, say, Luka Doncic or Kyrie were out of sync, it affects the rest of the five that are on the court on your particular side of the ball. And it's no different in the secondary. If Michael Hyde and Jordan Poirier, when we were in Buffalo, were not in sync in our secondary, it didn't matter what Tre'Davious White did. He was going to be affected because our safeties weren't on the same page with our corners or with Taron Johnson at nickelback. So that symmetry in the secondary is extremely important, and that cohesiveness that's necessary to have a good unit. It's imperative in the backfield. You don't want to just have a good player. You need a unit to have in order to have a good secondary, and they got to be playing as one. And so the communication part of it, the technique part of it, those guys being able to spend time with one another away from the field as well as what they do on the field, just developing that brotherhood that you need to have a strong secondary.
You mentioned it right there. We're talking about the brotherhood. And again, Bucky, you framed it perfectly, because the offensive line, we always see, the offensive line goes out to dinner, or the offensive line all gets presents from the quarterback when you get, to the end of the season. Like they're clumped together. And then I feel like in the secondary, we talk about he's a shutdown corner, or this is a safety who can play. We don't connect them together. You touched on it, Coach, with them spending time together. Have you noticed throughout your career, you've been around this game a long time as a player and then as a coach for over 30 years, have you noticed the personal relationships, the importance of that? Is there a connection between those guys getting along, spending time together outside the facility, and that, cohesiveness showing up on the field?
I think it is for sure, Daniel. In all the good secondaries I've been a part of, even going back to my playing days with the success that we had when we won the Super Bowl in Chicago, Gary Fensick, I don't know if you remember some of these names, but Gary Fensick was our safety. Todd Bell, who's a great player who set out that season. But Dave Durson, along with Mike Richardson, who was a terrific player for us, we were in lockstep off the field as well as on the field, and we'd stay post practice and we do drills together. Even after our defensive back coach had taken us through what we needed to go through as a secondary in practice, I mean, we'd stay afterwards and watch tape together. And it was the same way when I was in college with Ronell Young, who was a long time NFL player with the Philadelphia Eagles, first round pick. We were corners in the secondary, and we had another guy named Mark Harper who played for the Cleveland Browns, and another guy named Albert Fowles who played with the Eagles. We were all in lockstep off the field as well as on the field. And I think once again, when we're talking about what allows you to have a great unit, I think there needs to be some likability there. There needs to be someone who doesn't have a big ego and doesn't feel like, I've got to get all the attention. When we're talking about what we need to do well, Julian Love, who is an outstanding defensive back, who I think over time you guys will be talking about him a lot. Tariq, one of our corners, young corners, who has a bright future. One of the things that we're trying to instill in those guys is a love for each other and a respect for each other's games. Because when you have that love and respect for one another, it has a chance to take your game to a whole nother level. And that's what I've seen with really good secondaries. Those guys, they don't get concerned that someone else got 2 interceptions. They didn't get any of that game. It becomes a competition. You got 2 that game. Well, I'm getting 2 the next game. And they just feed off of each other with that same positive energy. And that's what you want when you're trying to develop a really strong secondary where, they all feed off of each other.
Coach, I've heard your former players in Buffalo just kind of rave about the freedoms that you gave them in terms of like their ability to, in the pros, we call it play the play, in terms of these are things that we've seen show up on tape. When this shows up, there's a trust and connection that if I'm Tre'Davious White, hey man, this guy lines up on the split. The numbers say that he's running the out, I'm going. But Poirier, I need you to back me up in case. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of that trust, that chemistry and trust when it comes to guys making plays, because it's not just a guy making a play in a vacuum. It's the freedom that he has to make the play because someone else has his back if it doesn't go right.
Yeah. That's a great point, Bucky. I'm gonna tell you where that mindset that those players who played for me, whether it's Troy Vincent back in my days back in Philadelphia, or Bobby Taylor, or Al Harris, who's now coaching the secondary in Dallas, that ability to be able to let those players be themselves, that comes from Buddy Ryan, who was my defensive coordinator when I was in Chicago, long time NFL coach, one of the greatest defensive coordinators in our league's history. I can remember a game, we were getting ready to play the Raiders, and they were in Oakland at the time. And Cliff Branch, if you guys remember him, great receiver, Hall of Fame. So Buddy is telling me, okay, you're going to have to lock up Cliff throughout this ball game. Now, I want you Cliff Branch on tape. This guy's good. He's fast. He's quick. He wasn't a big guy, but he was so elusive, man. And so I came to Buddy as the week went on, and I said, because we were a big man-to-man team with pressure, and we got out the quarterbacks because of the blitz package we had. So I went to Buddy and I said, Buddy, I don't want to be up there pressing Cliff Branch the whole game. I think sometimes I need to back off a little bit and be able to mix it up. And he turned to me, he said, Leslie, whatever you got to do to get it done, just get it done. I'm good with it. Make sure it works. If you go back home, make sure it works. But I'll never forget that, man. And it helped me to be a better player because my coach, he wasn't so stuck on just what he believed in his strategy, and he considered how I felt. I'm the guy out there. I'm the guy out there playing. I'm the guy I got to cover Cliff Branch, and that helped me throughout my career. And then once I became a coach, I always remembered how Buddy treated me and Mike Singletary and all the great players that we had. People talk about that 46 defense that we were part of, but what made that 46 was Buddy being willing to listen to us. And when we came up with suggestions about the game plan and saying, hey, Buddy, maybe we should think about this on 1st and 10, or in my case, hey, I like to be able to not press every down. But to have a coach who empowers you in that way, and when players get that, I found that those guys are really run through a wall for you because they know you trust them and you respect what they have to say. So I've always remembered that from my days under Buddy Ryan.
Yeah, I think that's so smart, Coach. You think about, you have somebody with instincts. I always laugh about that. We put so much emphasis on instincts, and then you try and put them in such a rigid environment where you don't let their instincts show. Like, we just drafted this guy because of these instincts, and now we're trying to tell him he's got to live in this narrow road here. I think that's really interesting. Bucky and I have had this discussion for years. I don't know if it's changed over the years. I'd be curious to see if in your time in the league, if you felt that it has. But given your druthers, if you're talking about building a great defense, is it front to back or is it back to front with the way the game is today?
Yeah, that's another good one, man. You guys had some good questions. This is one I've thought about a lot. When you're trying to construct a team, in particular on defense, and I would have to say it's got to be back to front. You got to find ways to get after these quarterbacks. And this goes back to my playing days as well. We had some good players on the back end, but our front was nasty. We got a Hall of Famer and Richard Dent, who's in the Hall of Fame now. Dan Hampton is in the Hall of Fame. Steve McMichael's about to go into the Hall of Fame. And in my career as a and it is a passing league, as we all know on this call. And so you got to find ways to disrupt the passes. As great as Dion was as a defensive back, without that pass rush, those receivers are going to get open. The rules are so liberal now. It's not like when the Mel Blount rule was put in, where you could just jam them up all down the field and keep them off their spots. And you got to give them some room. So they're going to catch some balls. Well, how can we disrupt the timing of that quarterback? And what I found is the greatest mismatches are usually the matchups between offensive tackles, these fast defensive ends, these guards that are okay guards against some tremendous athletes that are playing defensive tackle. And that's where your greatest mismatches are. So I have to say, from back to front. If we can get our front right,
Mhm.
if we can get our front right, I'm sorry, front to back. If we can get our front right, we have a chance to be successful on defense.
Okay, Coach, you've been so gracious with your time. So I want to hit you with this last one because I think it's a conversation that comes up a lot of times during the draft. So people talk about the shutdown corner and the value of the shutdown corner and those things. So I got a question that is two-part. One, what's the challenge in building a defense around a shutdown corner that can travel, meaning he can line up outside, inside, and whatever? How does that impact the rest of the team? And two, what traits are you looking for from a corner before you treat him as a shutdown corner, where you give him the responsibility of being a guy that travels and takes on the number one receiver from the opposing team?
Well, I don't know if there are really any problems, Bucky, when you have a guy who has that type of ability. If he has the ability to match up with receivers, everybody else kind of plays around him, and you kind of build a defense in that way, which is not a bad thing.
Mhm.
You have a guy who can, and we would do it with Tre'Davious, and I think hopefully we'll be able to do it with Tariq. I think we will be in Seattle, and there are other good corners who will allow this as well. But when you have a guy who can lock down that team's number one receiver and travel with him, it just gives you so many variables from a defensive play caller standpoint. You almost feel like we've erased that player, and now we're making you play left-handed on offense. So you got to go to your alternative on offense. And that usually works in our favor because we can protect that lesser corner who may not be as good as our shutdown corner, which, makes our defense stronger. The second part of it, I don't know if, the things that I look for is production. A guy could run real fast at the combine. He can jump real high at the combine. He can do all these different things. But if it doesn't show up on the field when we are doing one-on-ones, or when we're doing 7-on-7, or we're doing 11-on-11 practice, he's not a shutdown corner, even though he has all these great numbers. So his production tells me he's a shutdown corner. When he lines up in practice and in the preseason games, and he's blanking people, he's denying catches. That guy has my attention. I'm paying attention to him, and I'm trying to develop him, because now, if he's shown the physical traits, now I have to find out, will he be able to handle the adversity that comes along with being they caught a 30-yarder for a touchdown. Does he have the mental toughness to be able to move on from that and line up and play the next play? So once we identify those physical traits, now I want to find out, does he have the mental makeup to handle some of the ups and downs that corners have to face in our league?
That's great stuff, Coach. We appreciate your time, and we kept you a little long here. But the last thing, and I'm going to let you run. Now that you're Pacific Northwest, I don't know if you're a chowder guy, but I'm just curious, having spent time in the Northeast, Northwest, I would love any comparison you'd have there between the chowders.
Oh, man. I like good food no matter what coast is on, Daniel. So East, West, wherever, Northwest, I'm good. If it's good, I'm going to eat it.
Yeah, see, Coach, we've got East Coast, West Coast, or even maybe it's West Coast and Canada wrap beef right now. We don't need chowder beef. I see what you're saying. Just play that thing right down the middle. That's good stuff. Hey, Coach, you are the best, man. We loved having you as a colleague, but we'll be honest. We're excited you're back in it, man, and we're excited to follow you and the Seahawks in this upcoming season, man. Best of luck to you. We thank you so much. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your friendship.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Well, there you go, Buck. That was a fun one, man. Good to visit with him. Again, this is the off season. We get to do these little pet projects. And I took a lot from that. When you think about building that unit, he talked about it in terms of front to back. Interesting. I thought that was fascinating. Yeah. Somebody who's a secondary guy, he still says, look, I don't care. The rules have changed. He still feels like pressuring the quarterback, impacting the quarterback is going to have more impact front to back than maybe trying to smother people with coverage to allow time to get home, building back to front.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting observation, but it's one of the things that I've heard. It's funny that Leslie Frazier said that, because going way back to when I was playing, Willie Shaw, defense coordinator for the Raiders, and the dad of David Shaw, used to always talk about the front being far more impactful than the secondary. And if you can disrupt the timing of the passing game by putting pressure on the quarterback, it does change the way that the offense executes and operates. And I think that's why we see, DJ, we see the money, right? Follow the money in terms of the value and how we value people in the league. The money continues to rise for the pass rushers while it's kind of stagnated for the defensive backs. I think the league is telling you that they value the guys that can knock down the quarterback more so than the guys that can blanket the receivers on the perimeter.
I also thought, we talked about, he didn't say it specifically like this, but you could tell it in his voice when he talked about guards, like the best matchup on the field.
Tomato cans.
The tomato can. We've always said almost every team, if you go through all 32, there are very few teams that are rock solid with those three interior linemen. Very few. So what's the trump card? Well, we've seen it. Look at the contracts that Christian Wilkins and Simmons and all these guys have got, and Quinnen Williams, Chris Jones. Man, if you got somebody that can just annihilate those guys, man, what a benefit. And I thought, okay, well, he's on Seattle. Who did Seattle take in the first round this year? Look, Byron Murphy. Yeah. Byron Murphy, to be that guy, to give you that matchup advantage to win. And not only is it a good matchup in terms of the talent disparity between that guard and that defensive tackle in terms of athleticism, it's also the shortest route to the quarterbacks. You're going to be the most disruptive, and there's not as many things you can do to take those guys away as you could with, being on the edge, knowing where you're going to be, and I can send tight ends and backs over there.
Yeah, no, it's just a way to be able to do it. But yeah, he kind of let slip, and I don't know if he really wanted everyone to know or pay attention, but he did talk about being able to attack in the biggest mismatches, because I've heard you talk about the biggest mismatches are right up front. And we have seen teams really start targeting those guards. Think about what Michael Parsons was able to do for the Dallas Cowboys a couple of years ago, where Dan Quinn would isolate him on those guards and give him a two-way go to attack. I just think that is where the value is. And it's not only being able to put your outside pass rusher in a three technique position on passing downs, it's finding the defensive tackles that have elite pass rushing skills and really tapping into that and making that a priority when we're doing evaluations and when we're ranking guys that we want to take at the top of the board.
Oh, that's a great point, man. I also thought another takeaway, Seattle specific. Julian Love, big fan, and we've talked about him on here. He's a good player, but man, he's a big believer in Riq Woolen. We saw him in his rookie year go off. Last year wasn't quite as productive as he was that first year. But, Witherspoon came in there as someone we both loved and played great last year. But he talked about, potentially having a guy that could travel and could take on number one wideouts. And he was very favorable there on Riq Woolen.
Yeah, no, I think there's something to that. And I think the natural thing that a coach sees when he falls up in the Pacific Northwest and sees Tariq Woolen, one, you just don't see guys with that size, that length, and that speed. Two, you go back and you see how he played his rookie year. If someone plays that well at the NFL level, he can do it again. Now we got to figure out how do we unlock that so it can be a consistent level of performance for him. And then Julian Love. We have talked about on the podcast, particularly in recent weeks, just how we are fans of smart football players, high IQ, solid instincts. Julian Love, when you talk to people about him, they talk about, man, he's the consummate pro, high IQ, a guy who has played at a high level in his role for various teams. I think the Seattle Seahawks feel really good about what Love can do. And we talked about Mike McDonald's system and how, complex for them, easy for us. We're going to make it easy for us because it's conceptual learning, but we're going to show a bunch of different looks to the defense that throws them off. And even though it's simple for us, someone in the back end has to get everyone lined up and doing it on the same page. I think what Leslie talked about with Julian Love was also part of the bigger theme that he had about the secondary. The importance of communication and trust in the back end allows the coordinator to do more things when it comes to attacking the offense.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what that defense looks like. And obviously the scheme that Coach McDonald's bringing over has been successful at the collegiate level and the NFL level. So excited to see how that all comes together. The other thing on that Love point, which I think is fascinating with the draft stuff, we're always trying to figure out how do you get the right information on these guys coming out? What can help you in the evaluation process outside of just watching the tape? We can all do that. And with DBs, Buck, maybe one of the questions we ask these guys when we get them on and visit with them at these all-star games, the combine and such, is like, hey, what did you do outside of your duties in terms of your meetings? If you're a corner or you're a safety, what'd you do for watching extra tape? And then maybe, I'd always thought about asking these questions. What are you doing on your own? Tell me your own plan.
Mhm.
What's your own? Hey, maybe it's like, what are you organizing as a group? How are you getting who are the
Mhm.
alpha leader guys who are able to get not only themselves doing the extra work, but to collect the group, get them together, putting in that, knowing that, hey, we're going to be as successful as our weakest link. We got to be collectively putting in extra work. Like he was talking about with that 85 Bears group.
Yeah, no, I think that is a lot to it, and that's where the leadership part comes to it. When we're doing the quest, we're asking the questions on the school call, and we're asking the people around the program, well, who is the guy that grabs the clicker when they're watching film on their own? Who is the guy that kind of sets the voluntary mandatory things when it comes to the group working out together? Those guys are going to be the ones that lead the group when you are away. And this time of year, we think about the 6 weeks that you have off between mandatory mini camp and training camp. Who's the guy that's organized those guys saying, "Hey guys, why don't y'all come down to Florida and kind of work out with us? Let's make sure we hit the ground running in training camp." All of those things are essential, and it's the next step in evaluation. The evaluation on the first step is like size, speed, physicality, all those other things. But the next step is what kind of leadership do they bring? What are the intangible qualities? How can they raise the level of expectation and performance in the room by being selfless when it comes to being a leader?
Yep, no doubt. I think in those groups too, offensive line, secondary, having guys that like being around each other is important. You can say at other positions you live on an island. Those are not island positions. Secondary and the offensive line. So having guys that are personable, having guys that are relatable and likable, I think there is something to that. I think you give them a little bit of a nudge, a little bit of a bump there over somebody that might be a little bit, maybe he's introverted and just doesn't want to be a part of things. I mean, look, you're really talented. They'll take you in any shape, size, form, personality. I get that. But man, if it's close, I'd rather have somebody that's going to be engaging and is going to help the collective group there. But
Yeah.
anything else you think about that
No,
stuff?
it's always that. And I thought it was funny when he talked about basketball and using those analogies and talking about how Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum being connected and how everybody else kind of took the cues from them. And look, man, it's important. And DJ, it's funny because a lot of times we get so caught up as scouts and as people that really love the game. We talk about, hey, man, it's collecting the best talent. But when you're building a team, chemistry is the underrated part of it. How people get along, how they communicate with one another, it matters not only when we talk about all 53, but in those position groups. And so a lot of it is when you take it to people, how does this guy fit into that room? Is he a fit? Because if he's not a fit, then man, it disrupts the chemistry. And you can't get anything going no matter how talented the player is. If he doesn't connect with the other players that he has to work with, it never works.
Yeah, and I also to close, he talked about the Bears team he played on, how close those guys were. Then you think about the Eagles defense that he had there with Bobby Taylor and Troy Vincent. And then you think about Poyer and Hyde and the run that they've had there in Buffalo, Tre'Davious White. Like, it's interesting, man. It's not one guy, it's not one star and then a couple mediocre players. It's multiple guys that can be comfortable sharing the credit that gets assigned. And I don't think that's a coincidence.
No, it's not a coincidence. And it's one of the things that we'll continue to explore as we continue to learn from others. And that was a great conversation with Leslie. So I'm glad he was able to join us and come on.
Yeah, and we've got some more pods coming your way. So we did the stuff last week, ranking the some of those offensive positions, those skill positions. We're going to have a couple episodes this week, so be on the lookout for those over the next few days. We'll flip over to the other side of the ball, see if we can't learn something on the defensive side as well. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Hope you guys have a wonderful week, and we'll catch you next time right here on Move the Sticks.